The scalpel moved faster than anyone in the OR had ever seen. The patient's heart had stopped twice already, and the attending surgeon had stepped back, shaking his head, defeat written across his face. Blood pooled in the surgical field, the monitors screaming their warnings into the sterile air. The anesthesiologist called out the dropping blood pressure, her voice tight with panic. But the resident in the corner, the one nobody knew, the one they called Ghost, stepped forward without hesitation. Her hands moved with a precision that seemed impossible, steady as stone even as chaos erupted around her. In 40 seconds, she did what 3 experienced surgeons couldn't. Her fingers found the bleeder, tied it off, and stabilized the torn vessels with movements so fluid they looked rehearsed. The monitors beeped back to life, steady and strong. The chief of surgery, Dr. Marcus Hale, had been watching from the observation deck above. He leaned forward, his hands pressed against the glass, and asked the question that would change everything. "Who is the surgeon who did the impossible in the operating room?" The scrub nurses exchanged uncertain glances. One of them finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just a resident, sir. She's been here about 3 months." Dr. Hale's eyes narrowed as he watched the woman below strip off her gloves with mechanical efficiency. She didn't celebrate. She didn't even look at the patient she'd just saved. She simply nodded once to the attending, who stood frozen in shock, and walked toward the OR doors. "What's her name?" Dr. Hale demanded. The nurse checked her tablet. "Mitchell. Dr. Sarah Mitchell." He watched her disappear through the doors, and something in his gut told him that name was going to become very important. The patient stabilized completely over the next hour, but the atmosphere in the OR remained strange, almost haunted. Dr. Patel, the attending who'd frozen during the crisis, couldn't meet anyone's eyes. He knew what had happened. He knew that a resident, a first-year resident, had just saved a life he'd been ready to give up on. The other surgical staff whispered among themselves, stealing glances at the empty space where she'd stood. Nobody had ever seen technique like that. Not here. Not anywhere. When the surgery was finally complete and the patient wheeled to recovery, Dr. Patel found himself standing alone in the scrub room, staring at his own hands. They were trembling. He'd been a surgeon for 15 years, and tonight, he'd been shown up by someone who shouldn't have had a fraction of his experience. He looked up at his reflection in the mirror and saw something he didn't like, fear mixed with shame. Who was Sarah Mitchell, and where had she learned to operate like that? If you're watching this from somewhere in the world, drop a comment and tell us where you're from. We love connecting with our community, and your support keeps these incredible stories coming. Now let me take you back to where this all really started. 3 months ago, I walked through the front doors of St. Catherine's Hospital, with everything I owned in a single duffel bag. My name is Sarah Mitchell. At least that's what my paperwork says now. That's the name I gave them when I applied for the residency position. The name I use when I introduce myself. The name I answer to when someone calls me in the hallway. It's not exactly a lie, but it's not exactly the truth either. The truth is complicated, and complicated is dangerous. So I keep it simple. I keep my head down. I do my work. I don't make friends. I don't ask questions. And I sure as hell don't let anyone ask me questions. The residency coordinator, a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Chen, had looked at my application with barely concealed skepticism. My resume was thin. Graduation from a mid-tier medical school, no research publications, no letters of recommendation from prestigious mentors, just the bare minimum required to qualify. "We don't usually accept residents with your profile," she'd said, her finger hovering over the reject button on her computer. I'd sat across from her in that cramped office, my hands folded in my lap, and said nothing. Sometimes silence is the best answer. After a long moment, she'd sighed and clicked approve. "You'll start Monday. Don't make me regret this." I didn't thank her. I just nodded and left. My first day at St. Catherine's was exactly what I expected. A blur of orientations, paperwork, and suspicious looks from the other residents. They were younger than me, most of them fresh out of medical school, eager and ambitious and hungry to prove themselves. They traveled in packs, comparing scores and sharing stories about their undergraduate achievements. I stayed on the periphery, invisible. That's where I needed to be. During the welcome speech, Dr. Marcus Hale stood at the front of the auditorium, his silver hair catching the light, his voice commanding attention without effort. "In this hospital," he said, his eyes scanning the room, You will earn respect through skill, dedication, and humility. You will be tested every single day. Some of you will rise to the challenge. Others will not. When his gaze landed on me, it lingered just a fraction too long. I felt my pulse quicken. I looked down at my hands and waited for the moment to pass. That night, I unpacked in the tiny on-call room they'd assigned me on the 4th floor. The room was barely large enough for a bed and a locker, with a small window that looked out over the parking lot. I didn't mind. I'd slept in worse places. I pulled out my few belongings: 3 pairs of scrubs, a change of civilian clothes, a toothbrush, and a small wooden box wrapped in a cloth. I set the box on the narrow shelf above the bed and stared at it for a long moment. I hadn't opened it in 2 years. I wasn't going to start now. There was also a photograph, face down in the bottom of the bag. I left it there. Some things are better left buried. The first few weeks passed in a haze of exhaustion and routine. I volunteered for every shift nobody else wanted: the overnight traumas, the post-op monitoring, the cases where the patient was already circling the drain and survival was a long shot. The other residents started avoiding me, not out of malice but out of discomfort. I didn't fit in. I didn't laugh at their jokes or join them for coffee or complain about the attending physicians. I was a ghost, and they treated me like one. That was fine. I preferred it that way. But Dr. Hale noticed. I could feel his attention like a weight on my shoulders. He watched me during morning rounds, his eyes sharp and assessing. He watched me in the OR, standing in the observation deck with his arms crossed. He watched me in the hallways when he thought I wasn't paying attention. What did he see when he looked at me? Did he see a struggling resident trying to keep up? Or did he see something else? Something that didn't quite fit? One evening, about 6 weeks into my residency, I was in the skills lab practicing sutures when Dr. Hale walked in. The lab was supposed to be empty at that hour, and I froze when I heard the door open. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, watching me work. My hands didn't shake, but my heart was pounding. Finally, he spoke. "You have excellent technique," he said. "Where did you train?" I kept my eyes on the suture pad. "Medical school, same as everyone else." "Which school? Does it matter?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. He was quiet for a moment. "I suppose not, but I'm curious. You operate with a confidence that most residents don't develop until their 3rd or 4th year. It's unusual." I tied off the suture and set down the needle driver. "I had good teachers." He nodded slowly, but I could tell he didn't believe me. "Well, keep up the good work, Dr. Mitchell." He left, and I sat there in the empty lab, my hands finally starting to tremble. I knew then that I was on borrowed time. Dr. Hale was smart, and he was suspicious. It was only a matter of time before he started digging. And if he dug deep enough, he'd find things I couldn't afford for anyone to find. That night, I lay awake in my on-call room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant wail of sirens. I thought about leaving. I thought about packing my bag and disappearing before anyone could ask the questions I couldn't answer. But something stopped me. Maybe I was tired of running. Maybe I wanted to prove that I could still do this, that I could still be a surgeon, even after everything that had happened. Or maybe I was just too stubborn to quit. Either way, I stayed. And 3 weeks later, everything fell apart. The night it happened started like any other. I was on trauma call, standing in the ER with a cup of terrible coffee, waiting for the inevitable chaos. It came at 11:47 p.m. A 32-year-old male, car accident, high-speed collision, multiple traumas. The paramedics wheeled him in on a gurney, his face pale, his breathing shallow, blood soaking through the bandages they'd applied in the field. GCS of 10, BP dropping, suspected internal bleeding. The lead paramedic rattled off as we moved him into the trauma bay. Dr. Patel was the attending on call, and he took charge immediately, barking orders to the nurses and residents. I stood back, waiting for my assignment, my hands already itching to move. The patient crashed within minutes. His blood pressure plummeted, and the monitors started screaming. Dr. Patel called for blood, for fluids, for every intervention in the book. But nothing was working. I could see it in his face. The moment the confidence drained away and panic took over. "We need to open him up," I said. Dr. Patel shot me a look. "We don't have time to get him to the OR." "Then we do it here," I said. He hesitated, and in that hesitation the patient's heart stopped. The monitor flatlined. The room erupted into controlled chaos. Chest compressions, epinephrine, The crash cart rolling in. They got him back once. Then he crashed again. Dr. Patel froze. I saw it happen. The exact moment he gave up. His hands hovered over the patient, useless, and his eyes went distant. That's when I moved. I didn't ask permission. I didn't wait for orders. I just stepped forward, grabbed the scalpel from the tray, and made the incision. My hands moved on pure instinct, muscle memory taking over. I found the bleeders, clamped them, tied them off. I stabilized the torn vessels and packed the wound. 40 seconds. That's all it took. The monitors beeped back to life, steady and strong. The room went silent. Everyone was staring at me. The nurses, the residents, Dr. Patel. I looked up and saw Dr. Hale standing in the doorway of the trauma bay, his face unreadable. Our eyes met, and I knew. I knew that my quiet, invisible life here was over. I stripped off my gloves, dropped them in the biohazard bin, and walked out of the trauma bay without a word. My hands were steady, but inside, I was falling apart. Behind me, I heard Dr. Patel's voice, shaky and confused. What the hell just happened? Nobody answered him, because nobody knew. Nobody except me, and I wasn't talking. The next morning, I was summoned to Dr. Hale's office. The message came through my pager at 7 a.m., just as I was finishing my shift. Report to Chief of Surgery immediately. I stood outside his office door for a full 2 minutes, my hand hovering over the handle, every instinct screaming at me to run. I could disappear. I'd done it before. I could be gone before anyone even noticed, just another resident who couldn't handle the pressure and quit. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe I was just tired of running from the past. I knocked. "Come in," his voice called from inside. The office was exactly what I expected. Walls lined with diplomas and certifications, shelves filled with medical journals and textbooks, a large desk covered in paperwork. Dr. Hale sat behind that desk, his fingers steepled, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Sit," he said. I sat. He didn't speak right away. He just watched me, studying my face like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. Finally, he leaned forward. "Last night, you performed an emergency thoracotomy in the trauma bay. You made decisions that most surgeons with 20 years of experience would hesitate to make. You executed a procedure that requires not just skill, but experience. Real, hands-on, life-or-death experience." He paused. "Where did you learn to do that?" I kept my face carefully neutral. "Medical school, residency training, same as everyone else." His eyes narrowed. "Your file says you graduated from a mid-tier program 2 years ago. No honors, no research, no surgical fellowships, no trauma rotations at major centers. Yet you operate like someone who's seen 1,000 traumas, like someone who's worked in a war zone." My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't let it show. "I don't know what you want me to say, Dr. Hale. I want you to tell me the truth," he said, his voice hard. "Who are you really, Dr. Mitchell?" The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I could feel the walls closing in. I could feel the weight of every lie I'd told, every half-truth, every carefully constructed piece of my new identity starting to crumble. But I held his gaze and said nothing. After a long moment, he sighed and leaned back in his chair. "I don't know what you're hiding, but I will find out. I have resources. I have connections. And I don't like mysteries in my hospital." He dismissed me with a wave of his hand. I stood and turned toward the door, my legs shaky. I was almost out when his voice stopped me cold. "One more thing. We have a VIP patient arriving tonight. Senator Richard Dalton. Acute abdominal pain. Possible surgical intervention required. The press will be watching. The hospital's reputation is on the line." He looked at me. "I want you on the surgical team." I should have said no. I should have walked out of that office and never looked back. But instead, I heard myself say, "I'll be there." As I left, I felt the trap closing around me. Someone was digging into my past, and it was only a matter of time before they found what I'd buried. Senator Richard Dalton arrived at St. Catherine's Hospital at 9:13 p.m. in a convoy of 3 black SUVs with tinted windows. I watched from the 3rd-floor window as security personnel swept the entrance, as hospital administrators rushed around like ants, as the media vans began to gather outside the gates. This wasn't just a patient. This was a political event. The senator was 63 years old, a decorated veteran, a 3-term congressman with presidential ambitions. If anything went wrong tonight, it wouldn't just end careers, it would make national headlines. I scrubbed in at 9:45 p.m. alongside Dr. Patel and 2 other attending surgeons. The OR had been cleared of all non-essential personnel. Armed security stood outside the doors. The atmosphere was suffocating. Everyone knew what was at stake. Dr. Patel made the first incision at 10:02 p.m. Standard appendectomy, clean and controlled. His hands were steady, his movements precise. I stood across from him, assisting, watching, waiting. But the moment he opened the abdominal cavity, everything changed. "Jesus," Dr. Patel whispered. It wasn't a ruptured appendix. It was a perforated bowel, septic, with infection spreading through the abdominal cavity like wildfire. The smell hit us immediately, the unmistakable stench of fecal contamination. This wasn't a routine surgery anymore. This was a life-threatening emergency. Dr. Patel's hands faltered. I saw the fear flash across his face. "We need to call in a specialist," he said, his voice tight. "There's no time," I said. "If we don't control this now, he'll go into septic shock in minutes. He'll die on this table." Dr. Patel looked at me, and I saw the decision forming in his eyes. He was going to step back. He was going to let me take over. "Do it," he said quietly, moving aside. I stepped into position, and my hands went to work. Debride the necrotic tissue, irrigate the cavity, resect the damaged section of bowel, create a temporary ostomy. My movements were automatic, precise, born from years of experience that nobody in this room knew I had. The OR was silent, except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitors and the sound of my own breathing. I could feel everyone watching me, the nurses, the attendings, the anesthesiologist. I could feel the weight of their questions, their suspicions, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The senator's life was in my hands. And then, from somewhere beyond the surgical drape, I heard a voice. Weak, barely a whisper, slurred from the anesthesia, but unmistakable. "I know you." My hands froze. The suture needle hovered in midair. Slowly I looked up at the senator's face. His eyes were half open, clouded and unfocused, but they were looking directly at me. "Afghanistan," he whispered. "You were there. You saved my son." The room spun. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought everyone could hear it. No, this couldn't be happening. Dr. Patel's voice cut through the fog. "Dr. Mitchell, what is he talking about?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't breathe. Because if Senator Dalton remembered me, if he remembered what I'd done in that field hospital 3 years ago, then everything I'd run from was about to catch up, and there was nowhere left to hide. I finished the surgery in complete silence. My hands moved mechanically, completing each step with precision while my mind raced in 1,000 different directions. The senator's words echoed in my head. "Afghanistan, you were there. You saved my son." I tied off the final sutures, checked the ostomy placement, and ensured the abdominal cavity was clean. The monitors showed stable vitals. He would survive. But would I? Dr. Patel stood beside me, his eyes burning with questions he didn't dare ask in front of the others. The scrub nurses exchanged glances. Everyone had heard what the senator said. Everyone knew something was wrong. I stripped off my gloves, dropped them in the biohazard bin, and walked toward the OR doors without a word. "Dr. Mitchell, wait," Dr. Patel started. But I was already gone. I made it to the locker room before my legs gave out. I sat on the cold metal bench, head in my hands, trying to control my breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The technique they'd taught us in combat stress training. But it wasn't working. My hands were shaking. My vision was blurring. Afghanistan, 3 years ago. I'd been Captain Sarah Mitchell, MD, United States Army, attached to a forward operating base in Kandahar province. I was a trauma surgeon operating in a field hospital under constant threat of rocket attacks. We treated soldiers, coalition forces, local civilians, anyone who came through our doors bleeding. It was brutal, exhausting, and the most alive I'd ever felt. Lieutenant James Dalton had been brought in on a stretcher, his uniform soaked in blood, his chest torn open by shrapnel from an IED, sucking chest wound, severed femoral artery, multiple fractures. He was dying. The base was under orders to evacuate. Enemy forces were closing in, and command had given us 20 minutes to pack up and move. But I couldn't leave him. I wouldn't. I'd operated on that kid for 2 hours while mortars fell around us. while my commanding officer screamed at me to abandon the patient and get on the helicopter. I'd saved Lieutenant Dalton's life, and I'd been court-martialed for it. The door to the locker room opened. I looked up and saw Dr. Hale standing there, his face grave. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood a woman in a dark suit. Federal agent, I could tell from the way she carried herself. "We need to talk," Dr. Hale said quietly. "Not here," the woman added. "Somewhere private." I stood up slowly, my legs still unsteady. "Am I under arrest?" The woman's expression didn't change. "That depends on what you tell us, Captain Mitchell." The use of my rank hit me like a physical blow. They knew. They knew everything. Dr. Hale gestured toward the door. "My office. Now." I followed them through the empty hallways, my mind already calculating escape routes, backup plans, ways to disappear. But I was tired. So tired of running. Maybe it was time to face what I'd been hiding from. We reached Dr. Hale's office, and the woman closed the door behind us. She pulled out a badge. FBI, Special Agent Rebecca Torres. "Sit down, Captain," she said. I sat. Dr. Hale remained standing, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Agent Torres opened a tablet and turned it toward me. On the screen was my military service record. Captain Sarah Mitchell, trauma surgeon, decorated for valor, court-martialed for disobeying direct orders, dishonorably discharged. "You were one of the best combat surgeons in the military," Agent Torres said. "You saved hundreds of lives, and then you threw it all away to save one lieutenant against direct orders." She paused. "Why?" I looked at the screen, at the photo of myself in uniform, and felt something break inside me. "Because he was 19 years old," I said quietly. "Because he had a family waiting for him. Because leaving him to die would have been murder, orders, or no orders." Agent Torres studied me for a long moment. "Senator Dalton has been looking for you for 3 years. After you were discharged, you disappeared, changed your name, erased your records, started over. He wants to thank you." I laughed bitterly. "Thank me? I lost everything because of that decision. My career, my reputation, my entire life. And you'd do it again, wouldn't you?" Dr. Hale said softly. I met his eyes. "Yes, every single time." Before anyone could respond, the hospital's emergency alarm system blared to life. A mechanical voice echoed through the building. "Mass casualty event. All available surgical staff report to the emergency department immediately." "Repeat. Mass casualty event." Agent Torres's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. "Chemical plant explosion. 15 miles from here. Estimated 40 to 60 casualties incoming." Dr. Hale was already moving toward the door. He looked back at me. "How many mass casualty events have you handled, Captain?" "More than anyone in this building," I said. He nodded once. "Then let's go. We'll deal with the rest later." The emergency department was already descending into controlled chaos when we arrived. Nurses were setting up triage stations, residents were pulling crash carts into position, and the trauma bays were being cleared for incoming patients. Dr. Hale immediately took command, his voice cutting through the noise. "Listen up. We have multiple critical patients incoming. Chemical burns, blast injuries, respiratory distress. I want trauma teams in bays 1 through 6. Surgical residents, you're with the attendings. Medical residents, handle the walking wounded. Move." I grabbed a pair of gloves and headed toward Trauma Bay 1, but Dr. Hale's hand on my shoulder stopped me. "Not there," he said. "You're with me. We're taking the worst cases." He led me to the main trauma bay, the largest room in the ER, designed for exactly this kind of scenario. "You've done this before," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." "Then I need you to forget you're a resident. I need you to be the surgeon you were trained to be. Can you do that?" I looked at him, and for the first time since I'd arrived at St. Catherine's, I didn't hide. I didn't pretend. I just nodded. "Yes, sir. I can do that." The first ambulance arrived 3 minutes later. The paramedics wheeled in a woman in her 40s, her skin blistered and raw from chemical burns, her breathing labored. "Chemical exposure, 2nd and 3rd degree burns over 40% of body surface area, possible inhalation injury," the paramedic reported. Dr. Hale and I moved in sync, our hands working together like we'd been a team for years. Airway first. I intubated her while he established IV access, then fluids, pain management, burn assessment. The woman stabilized, and we moved her to the ICU. The next patient arrived before we'd even finished cleaning up. Then another. and another. The ER became a war zone. Patients on every gurney, blood on the floors, the constant wail of monitors and voices shouting medical orders. I moved through it all like I was back in Afghanistan, my training taking over, my hands steady, my mind clear. Dr. Patel appeared at my side during a brief lull. "Where did you learn to work like this?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. "In hell," I said simply, and moved to the next patient. Hours blurred together. I lost count of how many patients I treated, how many lives I saved, how many times I made split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. At some point, I looked up and saw the other residents watching me, their faces a mixture of shock and respect. I wasn't Ghost anymore. I was something else entirely. Around 3 a.m., the flow of patients finally slowed. The last critical case was stabilized and moved to surgery. I stood in the middle of the trauma bay, my scrubs soaked with blood and chemicals, my hands finally starting to shake from exhaustion. Dr. Hale approached me, his own scrubs equally destroyed. 37 patients, he said quietly. 0 deaths. That's because of you. I shook my head. That's because of all of us. No, he said firmly. That's because we had a combat surgeon leading triage. That's because we had someone who knew exactly what to do when everything went to hell. He paused. I was wrong about you, Captain Mitchell. I thought you were hiding something shameful, but you were just hiding your light. I didn't know what to say to that. Before I could respond, Agent Torres appeared in the doorway. "Senator Dalton is awake," she said. "He's asking for you." My stomach dropped. "I don't think that's a good idea." "He's insisting," she said. "And given what you just did tonight, I think you've earned the right to hear what he has to say." Dr. Hale nodded. "Go. I'll handle the cleanup here." I followed Agent Torres through the quiet hospital corridors, my heart pounding. What could the senator possibly want to say to me after all this time? Senator Dalton's room was on the VIP floor, guarded by 2 Secret Service agents who stepped aside when Agent Torres showed her badge. Inside, the senator sat propped up in bed, his face pale but alert. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. "Captain Mitchell," he said, his voice hoarse. "I've been looking for you for 3 years." I stood in the doorway, frozen. "Senator, my son is alive because of you," he interrupted. "James is alive, married, with a daughter now. He's a teacher. He has a life, and he wouldn't have any of that if you hadn't refused to leave him behind." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. "I lost everything for that decision," I said quietly. "I know," he said, "and that's why I've spent 3 years trying to find you. To fix it." He reached for a folder on the bedside table and handed it to Agent Torres, who passed it to me. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were official documents, military records, legal papers, letters with congressional seals. "I've been working with the Judge Advocate General's office," Senator Dalton explained. "Your court-martial was reviewed. The dishonorable discharge has been overturned. You've been granted an honorable discharge with full benefits and back pay." I stared at the papers, unable to process what I was reading. "I don't understand." "You were punished for doing the right thing," he said. "For saving a life when everyone else was ready to write it off. That's not a crime. That's heroism. And I made it my mission to ensure the military recognized that." Tears blurred my vision. "Why?" "Because my son gets to watch his daughter grow up," Senator Dalton said simply. "Because you gave our family a future, and because what they did to you was wrong." Agent Torres spoke up. "There's more. The senator has also been in contact with the medical board. Your medical license, which was suspended after your discharge, has been fully reinstated. You're no longer a resident captain. You're a fully licensed trauma surgeon." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. 3 years of running, of hiding, of pretending to be someone I wasn't. And in one night it was all over. "I don't know what to say," I finally managed. "Say you'll stop hiding," Senator Dalton said. "Say you'll go back to being the surgeon you were meant to be. This hospital needs you. This country needs you." I looked down at the papers in my hands, at the official seals and signatures that gave me back my identity, my career, my life. "I'll think about it," I said quietly. The senator smiled. "That's all I ask." I left his room in a daze, Agent Torres walking beside me. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," she said, "you decide who you want to be. Captain Sarah Mitchell, trauma surgeon, or Sarah Mitchell, resident. The choice is yours." I walked back through the hospital, past the ER where the last of the mass casualty patients were being treated, past the surgical wing where lives were being saved, past the locker room where I'd hidden for 3 months. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt something I'd thought was lost forever: hope. When I reached the main lobby, I saw Dr. Hale waiting for me. "Agent Torres called ahead," he said. "I know everything now." I braced myself for judgment, for anger, for dismissal, but instead, he extended his hand. "Welcome to the surgical staff, Dr. Mitchell. We're lucky to have you." I shook his hand, and something inside me finally settled. "Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet," he said with a slight smile. "I'm putting you in charge of our new trauma protocol. If we're going to handle events like tonight, we need someone who knows what they're doing, someone with real experience." I nodded. "I can do that." "I know you can," he said. "That's why I'm asking." As I walked out of the hospital into the early morning light, I pulled out my phone and made a call I'd been avoiding for 3 years. My brother answered on the second ring. "Sarah, is that really you?" "Yeah," I said, my voice breaking. "It's really me. I'm coming home." 2 weeks later, I stood in front of the surgical staff during morning rounds, no longer wearing resident scrubs, but the white coat of an attending physician. Dr. Hale had made the announcement the day before. Sarah Mitchell, formerly Captain Mitchell of the U.S. Army Medical Corps, was joining the staff as the new Director of Trauma Services. The reactions had been mixed. Some of the staff were thrilled, especially those who'd worked alongside me during the mass casualty event. Others were skeptical, wondering how someone could jump from resident to attending overnight. But Dr. Hale had made it clear. My credentials were impeccable, my experience was unmatched, and the hospital was lucky to have me. Now I stood before them, preparing to present my plan for overhauling the trauma department. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady. "For those who don't know me, my name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. Before I came to St. Catherine's, I spent 6 years as a combat trauma surgeon in Afghanistan and Iraq. I've operated in field hospitals under rocket fire, treated mass casualties with limited resources, and made life-or-death decisions in situations most of you will never face." I paused, letting that sink in. "I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this because trauma medicine is war. It's chaos, and if we're going to save lives, we need to be prepared for that chaos." I pulled up a presentation on the screen behind me. "Over the next 6 months, we're going to implement a new trauma protocol based on military combat medicine principles. We're going to run regular mass casualty drills. We're going to cross-train surgical and emergency staff, and we're going to create a rapid response team that can handle anything that comes through those doors." Dr. Patel raised his hand. "With all due respect, Dr. Mitchell, this sounds expensive. How are we going to fund this?" "Senator Dalton has secured federal grant money for hospitals implementing advanced trauma protocols," I said. "St. Catherine's has been selected as a pilot site. The funding is already approved." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room. Dr. Hale stood up. "Dr. Mitchell has my full support. I expect all of you to give her the same. Any questions?" Silence. "Good," Dr. Hale said. "Let's get to work." As the staff filed out, several people stopped to shake my hand or offer congratulations. Dr. Patel lingered behind. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "That night in the trauma bay, when I froze, you saved that patient's life. You saved my career. And I never thanked you." "You don't need to thank me," I said. "You just need to learn from it. Freezing happens, but we can't let it happen twice." He nodded. "Will you teach me how to stay calm when everything's falling apart?" I smiled. "That's exactly what this new protocol is for. You'll learn, I promise." After he left, I stood alone in the conference room, looking out the window at the city below. 3 months ago, I'd walked into this hospital with nothing but a fake resume and a desperate need to disappear. Now I was standing here as myself, fully, completely, unapologetically myself. My phone buzzed. A text from my brother. "Mom wants to know when you're coming to visit. She's been cooking for 3 days straight." I smiled and typed back. "Tell her I'll be there this weekend, and tell her I'm bringing someone." I'd started seeing James Dalton, the lieutenant I'd saved, the senator's son, for coffee. It had been awkward at first, both of us carrying the weight of that day in Afghanistan, but slowly we'd found common ground. He understood what it was like to have your life saved, and to spend years wondering how to repay that debt. I understood what it was like to sacrifice everything for a single decision. We were both trying to figure out how to move forward. Maybe we could figure it out together. That evening, I returned to my apartment, a real apartment now, not the on-call room, and finally opened the wooden box I'd kept hidden for so long. Inside was my military Medal of Valor, the one they'd given me before the court-martial. I'd never felt like I deserved it. But now, looking at it, I realized something. I hadn't been punished for doing the wrong thing. I'd been punished for doing the right thing in a system that didn't know how to handle it, and I'd do it again, every single time. I placed the medal on my bookshelf, next to a photo of my surgical team from Afghanistan. They were all smiling, exhausted, covered in dust and blood, but alive. We'd been through hell together, and we'd come out the other side, just like I was doing now. My phone rang. Dr. Hale. We've got an incoming trauma. Multi-vehicle accident on the highway. ETA 5 minutes. I need you here. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. On my way, as I drove through the city streets, sirens wailing in the distance, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do, saving lives. And nothing was going to stop me. The trauma came in fast and brutal. 3 vehicles, 7 patients, 2 critical. I moved through the ER like I was conducting an orchestra, directing residents, coordinating with attendings, making split-second decisions that kept people alive. Dr. Hale worked beside me, and for the first time, I felt like I had a true partner, someone who understood the weight of command, the burden of responsibility, the cost of every decision. We saved 6 out of 7. The 7th, a teenage boy, died on the table despite everything we did. I stood over his body, my hands still covered in his blood, and felt the familiar weight of loss settle over me. You can't save everyone. I'd learned that lesson 100 times in Afghanistan, but it never got easier. Dr. Hale found me in the scrub room afterward, staring at my hands under the running water. You did everything you could, he said quietly. I know, I said, but it still hurts. Good, he said. The day it stops hurting is the day you need to quit. I looked at him. Is that why you're still here? After all these years? He smiled sadly. I'm still here because every life we save makes up for the ones we lose. It's not about perfection. It's about showing up every single day and fighting like hell. I nodded. I can do that. I know you can, he said. That's why you're here. We walked out of the hospital together as the sun began to rise over the city. The night shift was ending, and the day shift was arriving, the eternal cycle of medicine continuing without pause. Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Hale said as we reached the parking lot. Yes? Thank you for not giving up. On yourself, on this hospital, on medicine. We need people like you. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them away. Thank you for giving me a second chance. You earned it, he said simply. As I drove home, exhausted but strangely at peace, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the battlefields of Afghanistan to a tiny on-call room where I'd hidden from my past. From a court-martial that had destroyed my career to a senator who'd spent 3 years trying to make it right. From a ghost haunting the halls of St. Catherine's to the director of trauma services. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been fair, but it had been worth it, because I was finally home. Not in a place, but in a purpose. And that was something no one could ever take away from me again. 3 months later, I stood in the same conference room where I'd first presented my trauma protocol, but this time I wasn't alone. The room was filled with surgical staff, residents, nurses, and paramedics, everyone who'd been part of the new program. Dr. Hale stood at the front. I want to thank all of you for your hard work over the past 3 months. Our trauma outcomes have improved by 40%. Our response times have been cut in half. And we've successfully handled 3 mass casualty events without a single preventable death. He paused. This is because of Dr. Mitchell's leadership and your dedication. St. Catherine's is now being recognized as a model trauma center, and other hospitals are asking to learn from our program. Applause filled the room. I felt my face flush. Dr. Hale gestured for me to stand. Dr. Mitchell, would you like to say a few words? I stood, my heart pounding, and looked out at the faces of the people I'd worked alongside for the past 6 months. When I came to this hospital, I was running from my past, I said quietly. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered, but you all showed me something I'd forgotten. That medicine isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, doing the work, and never giving up on the people who need us. I paused, gathering my thoughts. Every single person in this room has saved lives. You've made impossible decisions. You've worked through exhaustion and doubt and fear, and you've done it because you believe in something bigger than yourselves. My voice grew stronger. That's what makes us healers. Not our degrees or our titles or our credentials. It's our refusal to give up. Our commitment to fight for every life, every time, no matter the cost. I looked at Dr. Hale. Thank you for giving me the chance to remember that. Thank you for believing in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. The applause was deafening. As the meeting ended and people filed out, James Dalton appeared in the doorway. He was wearing civilian clothes, a backpack slung over his shoulder, and he was smiling. "Hey," he said. "Hey yourself," I replied. "What are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood," he said. "Thought I'd see if you wanted to grab dinner." I glanced at my watch. My shift had ended an hour ago, but I'd stayed to finish paperwork. I'd love that. We walked out of the hospital together, and as we stepped into the evening air, I realized something. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't waiting for the past to catch up with me. I was just living, just being, just moving forward. "You look happy," James observed. "I am," I said, and I meant it. I really am. We walked down the street, talking about nothing and everything. Two people who'd been through hell and somehow found their way back. And as the city lights began to flicker on around us, I thought about the question Dr. Hale had asked me that first night. "Who are you really, Dr. Mitchell?" Now I finally had an answer. I was a surgeon, a healer, a fighter, someone who'd lost everything and found it again, someone who'd been broken and put herself back together, someone who'd learned that the hardest battles aren't fought on battlefields or in operating rooms. They're fought inside ourselves, every single day, when we choose to keep going despite the pain. I was Captain Sarah Mitchell, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, and I was exactly where I was meant to be. Finally, after all this time, I was home. Thank you for watching this incredible story of courage, redemption, and second chances. If you enjoyed this journey, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing true stories. Drop a comment below and let us know what you thought. We love hearing from you. Until next time, remember, it's never too late to become who you were meant to be.